Welcome to the Ancient Town Magic Stone Story channel. Ancient Temple Story Part 2. Speaking of the temple, no one can remember exactly what year it was built. Just heard from the people here that before, there was a mother and her child who were beggars from a faraway place. That day, it was raining heavily and the wind was strong. The mother and child were sitting under a banyan tree to take shelter from the rain when they were struck by lightning and died. The next morning, when the villagers went out to the fields, they discovered it. They were both sad and afraid. Finally, they discussed it and decided to build a shrine for the mother and her child at the far end of the village. Over time, the temple has seriously degraded, each block of lime and mortar has mostly peeled off, and all four surfaces are covered with green moss. The tiles on the roof were also broken, and every time it rained, the inside was almost completely wet. Around the temple, there are also many ghost stories told by the elders in the village. For example, there was a time when Ton, Mr. That's son, was herding buffalo with his friends near the temple. For some reason, its eyes suddenly became dull as if possessed by a ghost, then it went straight to the lagoon and jumped in. Luckily, there were some people working in the fields nearby. They heard the children's screams and ran over before they were able to pick it up. When asked, he said his eyes suddenly turned dark, then it was like someone took his hand and led him away. It just kept walking unconsciously. Only when it was suffocated did its mind wake up a bit. When he opened his eyes, he saw a woman putting her hand to her mouth to signal him to keep quiet. However, that woman's face was so terrifying that it made him startled and struggled frantically. That's why the people searching far away knew its location and ran to pick it up. Luckily, it didn't do as the woman said, otherwise we wouldn't know what would have happened. When listening to Ton's story, everyone's faces showed worry and fear. After that incident, no one dared to let the children tend buffaloes near that temple anymore. Some time later, when Ton's story had not yet subsided, Han's story appeared. It was during the planting season. Her family was poor and had many fields, so she often left very early. Sometimes at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, she has been out in the fields for a long time. It was okay when she always went like that, but that day her family had a field near the temple. While she was cultivating, she suddenly heard the voices of a woman and a child playing from afar. It was clear that the sounds were very close, but when she looked up, she saw no one. Thinking she heard wrong, she didn't care and bent down to continue planting. Suddenly she felt cold on her back and goosebumps arose. She looked over at her groin and she seemed to freeze on the spot, screaming without a sound. Because she saw 4 dark legs, 2 big and 2 small, standing right behind her. She quickly threw away the handful of rye seedlings, stuck her head in her neck, and ran to stab her, about to fall. Behind her, she could still clearly hear the giggles of mother and daughter echoing. When she got home that day, she was sick in bed for a whole week. My whole body always feels cold, my face turns gray. Even though I have taken all Oriental and Western medicine, I still do not see any improvement. I always feel nauseous and tired. After someone told her, she went to the temple to worship Buddha, and then asked the monks to pray for her health to gradually stabilize. From that day on, every night, no one dared to go near that temple anymore. Gradually it became an abandoned temple for who knows how many years. Waiting for part 3.